And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 114. We've made it through the infield. We're heading to the outfield, the deep, dark spots of the outfield. It's going to be a multi episodes. This will be part one of the outfield. See how far we get through the first, 20 to 30 ADP in the NFBC. But we're going to keep getting you ready as if there is going to be a start to this season sometime soon. That's the optimism we have to keep for now. You can find me on Twitter at BDentric and my co-host helping me break it all down on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
We're doing pretty well, Bubba. Obviously, we're gonna keep it up. We're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep it light. We're gonna keep it light and fun. In another draft champions right now. I got a 9-pack of those, and I think this is my 7th or something like that. So got a little bit of a slow start to the season, but starting to pick it up a little bit and enjoying that, getting a feeling for kind of the draft room, seeing guys move up and down the boards. It's fun. So all we need is baseball now, and I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, it's fun. I got like this thing with our buddy Kang from the Barf League. He does some stuff on Baseball 365, and I won the league last year, so I'm in the Champions League. So I'm doing that draft.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, just you got to say that. But then I'm doing Rat Slam, which is a totally different animal. And it's so funny. People don't know the format very well. They're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just trust me. It's different. It's very, very different. It's cut line." So, and then most importantly, next time we record, we're hopefully at least 10 picks in each of TGFBI because that starts on Monday. Slow draft, but we got that kicking off on Monday, which will be fun. So yeah, there's a lot of industry stuff. Labor mixed draft took place on Tuesday night. We have Tout Wars. I think I'm drafting on the 2nd. You start drafting here pretty soon.
Drafting on the 1st, yeah. I have TGFBI starting next week, and why am I forgetting what it's called? Tout Wars and Tout Wars Draft and Hold starting. So I'll have some concurrent slow drafts going for sure.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot going on pretty soon. So yeah, let's get baseball. Let's make it happen, you rich people, you. So we'll go there. But before we go to the players in the outfield, it's a very deep position. There's pockets of it. There's a lot of guys go early. You can wait. There's different ways to get category pieces you're looking for, which we'll obviously hit on throughout these couple episodes. But before we get going, what's just your overall philosophy in the outfield? Because with starting 5 guys, some people think you really got to attack it early and often. Some think it's so deep you can kind of wait. Different ways to do it, of course. How do you approach the outfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some really good outfielders early on. And I think I don't know, I kind of like outfield. I kind of like outfield deep. I think there are, I always like come into things and I'm like a little bit concerned about the position because one thing you have to be aware of is just the platoons, right? There's so many, you run out of guys after a certain point who are playing every day. But I think there are some really interesting profiles later on in the draft. I know we won't get to a lot of those folks on this podcast, probably because we're going to focus on the first groups of folks. But generally with the outfield position, I can go early, I can go late. I'm pretty flexible. Like in the league that I'm in right now, I just drafted my first outfielder and that was at pick like 154 or something like that. And I'm not that too concerned. I feel like there are some really nice pockets of, like perceived value where, my spreadsheet is telling me that there's some value on the board there, especially in kind of those middle rounds for some outfielders. And then there's some later targets that I think if you're weak at different spots, you can address some of that weakness later on in the draft. So I know that a lot of people aren't a fan of outfield. They want to get outfielders early as well. And I can definitely see that because there's such high quality guys there. But I really feel like outfield is a position that I'm going to be flexible within the draft. If it looks like the outfielders are there early, I'm feeling good. I'm fine taking that. But if it's between that and some of the infield positions that I'm trying to fill first or catcher, then, I may wait a little while to get outfield just because I do like some of those kind of middle tier and later tier guys. How about you?
Yeah, we're pretty much on the same page. Like in years past, I tried to make it a point to get a couple big outfielders early and kind of get that like base in your outfield position. But the more we talk about it and the more at least I grow as a player, I got some more roster construction in my head. You've always been a roster construction guy, and we've talked about it some like you I think you said it best. that it's, it's more about the total of your categories, not total of how your positions are filled out. Basically, like fill out your roster over just filling out different positions. So I've done different ways in the drafts, like you said. I think it's more about if it falls. Sure, I got no problem jumping on them, but there is like some really good pockets as you go through there of some really quality outfielders that they might not be the 5 category guys, obviously, that you're getting early on, but that's how it is at every position. But at least like those outfielders that you're getting later in the draft is going to be much better than like third base options or like other options. So it definitely changes the way you want to approach things. I know some of my DCs I've gone outfield heavy early, and like I don't mind my team, but I know as I got deeper in the draft, I'm like, I still like so many of these outfielders, and I really don't like these other guys. Like I really don't like them, but I know I have to take them. Where if I was going kind of spreading it out and cherry picking an outfielder here and there and filling the other spots, like you said, it's a lot more comforting team. Let's put it that way. Does it mean it's the better team? We'll see, but it does. It leaves you many more options. I just know like there were points last year. That's why I think it feels a little different this year. There were points last year as drafts went on. I was nervous I wasn't gonna have enough outfielders because like it felt like it was drying up faster. Or the quality was drying up faster last year. Where this year, for some reason, it feels like it's just deeper than ever. Maybe it's because there's more platooning in baseball, so we're not expecting X amount of batting like at bat. So you're kind of cool with like 450 compared to 550, 600. I don't know, but I think the later you go, there are some good pockets like you mentioned. So we'll get to those next week for sure. But we got some fun ones early on here to talk about the names that most people will know. And for those keeping track at home, I'm using Draft Champions ADP since February 9th, 2 weeks ago. Gives us 12 completed drafts at the time of this recording. And if you're listeners from last season, you'll know how we do this. We go groups of 5, and we'll kind of just hit on these guys. So the first group's ADP 1, or outfielder 1 through 5, according to ADP. Got Fernando Tatis Jr. going around pick 2, Juan Soto around pick 6, Ronald Acuna Jr. around pick 8. And that's been climbing up, which is good to see. Bryce Harper about 10.5, and Kyle Tucker has creeped into a solid 5th. It's not even that close anymore, a little past ADP 11. So most people know these guys, but how are you kind of approaching these big 5 outfielders that at least 4 are usually going in the first round, sometimes 5?
Yeah, I think they're all good.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I mentioned before, like I think Tatis Jr. is the best player in fantasy without the shoulder issue. And so it's just a matter of whether you want to take that risk, which I think is a little bit overblown. I'm not as concerned about that. I drafted him at the 4 spot in one of my DCs. So I feel pretty good about him. Juan Soto, I think, is also obviously really good. I don't think you can really find any faults in him at all. The only question is, what the stolen base total is going to be. I think that's going to drive a lot of the value for him. He's going to have a high batting average. He's going to get you the counting stats. 12 steals in 2019, 9 steals in 2021, projected by the BatX for 11. So that's only the real question. But again, like I do think that you can make speed up later on in the draft. It just comes with warts, and we've talked about that extensively. Acuna is obviously, there's the injury issue, and that's why his ADP had been suppressed for a while. We now see him moving up steadily, like you mentioned before, up to about 8th in terms of ADP. I think the major question that I have with Acuna, and the reason I haven't gone with him yet, is mostly the speed. I mean, that speed is going to be really important for driving his value, not just the like elite levels of speed, but he has a good batting average, but he doesn't necessarily have the same elite batting average as guys going in this range. And so the speed, I think, is going to be important for him. And there's just so many question marks about it. I'm not sure I haven't seen yet, at least. I haven't seen like a need based on who else is around this area in going with Acuna, but I'm also comfortable going with pitching early on. And then with Harper and Tucker, I think the thing with Harper, I've drafted him, I think, in 1 or 2 drafts. The thing with Harper is I think we can very clearly see now that he had one outlier season of 249. And 243 back in 2016, I guess, but he's been 260 or above in, 5 of the last 6 seasons, 5 of the last 7 seasons as well. And so the floor is pretty high for him from a batting average perspective. And then the ceiling, we've seen, just as many 300 plus seasons for him as well. I don't think you project that. You don't expect that to happen. But there's that. And then ever since he's been to the Phillies, like the steals haven't really been a question, right? He's got 15 and 13, and then he had 8 in the shortened season. So you're getting those, 15, 13 steals, which is nice. Slightly more than Soto, but again, not having the batting average that's there necessarily, but pretty similar home run and run and RBI totals. And then on Kyle Tucker, I just think he's a really complete package for me. Like the batting average is going to be high, barring some bad luck. The home run totals and the steals are not going to be as lead as the other guys. He should move up at least one spot in the order to 6th. We've seen what he can do in 7th. So I like Kyle Tucker as well. I'm fine drafting him in the first round. I have not done it yet, but he also hasn't been available to me when I was drafting in those situations, or I went with starting pitching. So, that's kind of those first 5. That's my general synopsis on those.
Yeah, they're all, like you said, very good. I have shares of 3 of the 5. I don't have any Tatis because if I'm that early, I'm taking like Trey Turner or J Ram, so I just haven't fell on Tatis to where I'm at in drafts. But I'm with you kind of. He's one of those guys that you just take. We talked about him a lot. You take the chance because the ceiling's ridiculous. So go for it. But I love Juan Soto. People know that by now, especially in OBP leagues. For Tout Wars, I have the number 2 overall pick. I got him last year. Gonna go for him again this year. I love Juan Soto. He's an OBP genius. Batting average is great. The concern I have for him, and I agree with some of the masses that are preaching it, is the supporting cast may really, really hurt those counting stats. And that is the only concern I have. And it's probably a very like nitpicky concern if you're trying to decipher between the crew. I would still take Juan Soto ahead of these guys if you can. Just know that going into it may be murky water at times when it comes to run production and RBIs and that's in that sort. So that's why Bryce Harper, MVP, we know what you get. You said it, you pretty much know what you're getting from Bryce Harper now. You're going to get like 11, 12, 13 steals. You're going to get the power. He's going to be 5 categories and awesome. But the unicorn in the room and the potential guy that might be a top 5 pick next year is Kyle Tucker. We've talked about him time and time again, and other shows have as well. But he is the 5-tool player. He is that good. The questions that I see out there, which are great questions, are where does he hit in the order? Because you got guys like Curlin who's followed things, and they've seen him potentially at 2nd or 3rd. But if there's no Correa and company, do they make him 4th or 5th? Like there's all, and then there's I think roster resource has him at like 6th right now. So there's all kinds of ideas. That's where spring training would be great. Let's get an idea. Where's it going to be hitting? Because I don't think it's going to move him too much. He's already a late 1st round pick, but if you start seeing these be like steady in that 3rd, 4th spot in that order, so that means the RBI production can continue to climb. It's amazing. But he's got more steals upside than Bryce Harper. Power, I think, is pretty much similar. His batting average is same, maybe better. It's gonna be pretty close. It's the counting stats is where Harper, I think, gets him for now, but that could easily change if he's in the right situation in Houston. So Tucker could be that guy, and it's not like a big, bold call, but he could be like that top 5 pick next year that you're going, man, I should have taken him late instead of like debating between him and Mookie Betts or something else. But here we are. So yeah, all these guys are great. They're going kind of in the order you think they should. Tucker's the only one. If you want to kind of hop them, you can. I skipped over Acuna like a dummy. I have no shares of Acuna, and it terrifies me to have no shares of Acuna. I love Ronald Acuna, but you hit on it, Toby, that I think he's still going to be very good. I just am worried, when does he start running? Because he might play early, but when does he start running? Because that's the perk of having Acuna. That's why he was in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick last year, 30-30, 40-40. I don't think that's happening this year. You'd be happy with 20 steals if you can get there. So I'll be okay being wrong. Our buddy Matty Wood, he's in love with Acuna. So take your picks there. All right, 6 through 10. We got Mookie Betts at pick 16. Luis Robert, which apparently is Robert now, that's gone back to that, is just behind him about pick 16. Mike Trout, pick 17. Starling Marte, 25. And Jordan Alvarez at 32. So another fun grouping here. Lou Bob is moving up the ranks these days.
Yeah, Lou Bob's great. I mean, when I take a look at this grouping, Mookie Betts, I mean, Mookie's interesting because I think generally speaking, I would be like, hey, Mookie's been like a top guy the last little bit, and he's battled through injuries last year. And, so clearly where he's falling in drafts, although, I mean, he's not falling as much, but he's fallen like a decent amount in some of the drafts that I've been, and you kind of want to pick him up. But I have some concerns about Mookie. I think the biggest concern that I have is just is the power. When you look at him last year, he was battling injuries, so take that for what it's worth. But he only had 30 barrels last year over the course of the full season. That's 385 batted ball events, 7.8% barrel rate. If you look at his last 4 years of barrel rates and then max exit velocities, barrel rates 13.1%, 9.1%, 7.7%, 7.8%. So he hasn't really been, elite when it comes to that really since 2018. And we see like a downward trend there. If you look at his max exit velo over the same course of the years, 110.6, 109.3, 108.5, 107.9. So those are also headed in the wrong direction as well. Obviously, like he's in an incredible situation with the Dodgers, depending on where he hits, like I'm sure he'll probably hit second or third with Trey in the lineup now. But if he were to be leadoff, he's going to score a ton of runs. Second or third might increase that value a little bit, get him some more RBI. There's questions about the speed as well. In his last 3 seasons, I mean, he had 16 with Boston and he had 10 last year in his 2 full seasons. Are they going to continue to have him run? Generally speaking, steals are not something that are going to increase. Although last year, maybe the hip injury and the issues that he was fighting through, kind of stifled the steals a little bit. He did have 10 in that shortened season in 2020. But so I'm looking at those pieces. And then from a batting average perspective, he's obviously, really solid, still makes a ton of contact. But, again, like one 300 year, 2 300 years in the last 6 seasons for him. So again, like absolutely solid all around. There's just a few too many holes for me, given like, the ceiling that's around him. A little bit with Luis Robert. I really like him a lot. He's a guy that I don't mind drafting in the first round, kind of towards the back end of the first round. That's where he's generally going in drafts. He's the type of guy that I could really see taking that huge leap because he's got everything that you need with the speed and with the power. And then with the batting average, we saw the improvements that he had last year when he came back from the injury, making a lot more contact. He's still got like a wild approach. His O swing is at 44.5%. So that's very wild, and he's not going to recreate that 394 BABIP for that 338 average. But if you look at like the BAT-X, he's around 283. BAT-X has him for 283, 31 home runs, 13 steals. I think on the steals, it could be a little bit light for him. I think definitely the 20 steals mark would be something that I'd be looking closer to, just because he's young, he's fast. He was overcoming an injury last year. I'm sure they put a little bit of a damper on those steals. I think he, I want to say he like only had like 1 steal like in the second half or something like that.
Okay,
am I right?
He had that leg injury, that hip injury, or hamstring injury, whatever it was, hamstring injury.
Hamstring. So
he wasn't supposed to play the rest of the season, and he came back.
I know, and then he came back and won some people their league. So I think that comes back with full health. I mean, that's a part of his game. He's talked about that as well in some of the interviews that I've seen, that he definitely still considers that a part of his game. So I could easily see a guy who, the max EV is at 117.7, 27 barrels in just that portion of the season that he played. I can definitely see him being, like that 30 plus home run guy with 20 plus steals with a high batting average. And if he does that in the lineup that he's in, the runs and the RBI are going to be there. And, essentially like we love J-Ram because he's a 30-20 guy and the batting average is a little suspect. I mean, Robert in a lot of ways, I think has a pretty Not a similar profile in terms of the way they're hitting, but a pretty similar ceiling. And so if he does it this year, then I think he's a top 5 pick next year. So I do like him a decent amount. And then Mike Trout, I can't do Mike Trout where he's going, even though I know we love him. He's the best player in the world. In an OBP league, it's a slightly different conversation. But I don't see the steals happening. And, the batting average is fine, but the injuries have been mounting. And again, last year's injury is just a little weird where he ended up having he was out for the longest period of time with a calf strain, I think, of anybody in the last however many years, according to Derek Rhodes' injury tracker. Starling Marte, the steals are great. I think he overperformed a little bit in that department last year. But again, they're so valuable. And the thing is, it's not just about getting steals earlier. It's just about the flexibility that it allows you moving forward in drafts. I mean, I took 4 in my current DC. I took 4 straight pitchers to start off the draft. And I'm trying to build speed around that. And that is a little bit of a challenge, but it's still doable. Like, it's still possible to do it. So it's not like, you desperately need speed, but it certainly makes you have a lot more flexibility if you draft Marte. That being said, a year older, injury concerns throughout his career, really. I'm not down with Marte right now with where he's going. And then Alvarez is really good too. He's a great hitter. But again, that profile is just not something that I'm as interested in at this point in the draft, where he's going as well. So, yeah, that's my take on those 5.
Yeah, it's another fun group, of course. That's why they're going so early. And Mookie has been a tough one for me because we did that first pitch Arizona draft, fresh, like the postseason still going on. I took Mookie at like 7. And that's the only share of Mookie I have right now because I even said it when we talked about the recap on this show that I should have taken Kyle Tucker over him at that point. And it's like, I love Mookie. I expect a bounce back, obviously, because things are just rough. That hip injury was the killer for him. The stuff you mentioned with the barrels and the max EVs and everything are concerning for sure. He's still super young though, and atop that order, I expect him to still score a ton of runs and be quite productive. But is it enough to have him going over some of these guys? Probably not, because you mentioned Lou Bob, and I have a ton of shares of Lou Bob. I've taken him at the back end of round 1 or on the turn in round 2. That's because I've been getting so many picks back there. So that I have a lot of Lou Bob shares. And I'm with you. This is a guy that people were debating taking early last year before things went south. And I made the Kyle Tucker comment. You're probably right. Actually, Lou Bob could be the guy that jumps even more than Kyle Tucker potentially because the steals, I think, differentiates the two, as you mentioned, because Robert has 30-plus homer upside, as you mentioned, but those steals, he could go right past Kyle Tucker. And that's big. And can you imagine a potential lineup? And it'll be interesting to see what Uncle Tony decides to do there in Chicago. But you got guys like Tim Anderson and Lou Bob hitting 1-2, maybe. That'd be great. That was the thing with Robert was tough because sometimes he did at the top of the order, sometimes he did at the bottom of the order. He was all over the place last year, and that was the kind of frustrating part of it. But if you could have those two up top with your Abreu's, your Eloy's, your Moncadas coming behind him, Grandal, that's 100-plus runs scored most likely, and a lot of green lights to steal bases. Like, that's a lot of fun out there on those base paths. So I think Lou Bob is one of those guys for sure, and I'm glad for now that I have a lot of shares. Like, when you see Ronald Acuna at 8, how do you not see Lou Bob as the same player, if not better? It's confusing to me at times, but to each their own. Mike Trout, you nailed it. Like, I have 0 shares except for an OBP league where I took him at pick 11, I think it was. I was actually happy he fell to me that late because he is like an OBP god outside of like Juan Soto, basically. So I'll run there and find my stolen bases elsewhere. So, yeah, I love Trout. Won't be taking him many other places just because he just doesn't play anymore. Like, you can't bake in injuries, but the dude has not played more than like 130 games in like the last 4 or 5 seasons. It's bad. It's really bad with Mike Trout. So no shares for me, and it stinks. But Starling Marte, I'm with you. I outside of that share, a share I think in FPES. I think I took him in round 2 after Mookie Betts. I don't think I have any other shares because the more I dug in on him recently, it's like we know he had a phenomenal stolen base year. You have to think regression, sure. Going to New York really makes you think regression just because of Buck Showalter or not. Yeah, no, it's not Buck. Yeah, it's Buck Showalter's. Yeah, Buck Showalter's tendencies in the past for letting guys steals. This team is just not a team that's built for stolen bases. But the other real big surprising thing that I don't know, maybe a lot of people know it, but I just don't hear it talked about that often. When you look at Starling Marte's repertoire, and he had 12 home runs last year. It's been 12, 6 on a shortened season, but then 23-20. That was great. Prior to that, 7, 9, 19, 13, 12. Never really been a massive power guy. We saw those 2018, 2019. That was great, but that decline might be coming some more. He's usually just like a 25-ish stolen base guy, 20 to 30 maybe. But runs scored is where you got him because RBIs, he does not help out a ton either. So if he's not getting a ton of home runs, he's not getting a ton of RBIs, you're getting like, let's say, a 3.5 category contributor in round 2. And to me, there's a lot of other options in there. Like it could be your SP1. If you want to go early reliever, go get Liam Hendricks there. There's other outfielders. There's Manny Machado. There's situations like that it's making it harder and harder for me to go with Starling Marte. And it might be just a weak spot for me. Like I told people, if you love Marte's profile, wait around and take Whit Merrifield if that's what you want. Because if you really look at their stat lines, there's a lot of similarities. Marte might have the ceiling, but very similar players, except they're pretty close in age too. So I like Starling, but the more I dig in, it's harder for me to go there. And then last but not least, the one I've been really, really starting to want to get more shares of, I think I have 1 or 2 maybe, is Yordan Alvarez. And the leagues I do it in are the ones I wait on starting pitchers because you can still get steals in round 1 and round 3 per se if you're waiting on pitchers, if you're good on waiting on pitchers. Like Toby's philosophy obviously is he's going to be getting a pitcher early, which makes Yordan and getting steals an issue. And that's been pretty documented. But if you're willing to wait on pitching, what Yordan brings to the table with 30-plus homers, 40-plus home run upside, which is not as common as we once saw. He hits for average. I saw some great comparisons recently, and the more I looked at it, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of similarity in this profile to Vlad Jr., except maybe not the 300 average. But power and everything else, a lot of similarities there, and you're getting them a lot later. So I like Yordan. Don't have a ton of them because, yes, you want steals, you want pitching, whatever. But if you get the right setup, he fits. He definitely fits. So I become more and more interested, like because early on in draft season, I just crossed him off. I'm like, I don't want that profile, not doing it. But the more you kind of play, that's the whole point of doing draft and holds and all these things early is to kind of get a feel for your roster construction. He has a great fit. And the fact he's also outfield eligible this year. Last year, he was an immediate cross off because the util only so early. Outfield eligibility helps out a ton with Yordan. So big fan there.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
The one thing I'll say about Yordan, he did have 67 barrels last year and only 33 home runs. So there's a pretty big discrepancy there for sure. My only question with him is just the batting average. Like I think it needs to be better than the 270, like kind of 270-ish that he's projected for if he's going to be worth that spot.
Yeah. Okay. That's very fair. That's what makes him tricky. That for sure. But man, like he's literally one of the potential guys you would not be shocked if he hit 50 home runs. And there's not many of those guys anymore. So it's like he stands out in a big way for those means. But then again, still got those bad knees too. So keep an eye on that. 11 through 15, I mentioned him just a second ago. Whit Merrifield, pick 34. So he's about 10 picks after Starling Marte. Teoscar Hernandez, 34.5. Said Mullins is dropping Justin Mason at pick 37. Aaron Judge at 41. And Byron Buxton sitting strong at 50 with a min pick of 34 in the last 2 weeks. So the Buxton fans are still out there. I'll say that much. But what's your thoughts on 11 through 15?
Yeah, I mean, I won't kind of go there. I mean, he just compiles year after, like the the comparison to.
Hey, check your mic cord. You keep going in and out.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
How's this? Is that
good.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not gonna touch the mic cord.
There you go.
All right, this is gonna be difficult. So I always go to the mic cord. So I think it's an interesting comparison with Marte because the steals have been fairly similar for the two of them. I would say if you had to lean batting average for one of them, at least from a skills perspective, I'd lean with Merrifield a little bit there. And Merrifield's been kind of the picture of health. And so, for that reason, I think that that's kind of a good comparison. But Witt, I like. There's nothing that's really falling in the profile. He got unlucky with the home runs last year, and so those should bump up a little bit, assuming he can put together the same skills this year. Teoscar, I like as well, going in this range. I was not a believer after his initial season. Like I had a ton of him in the season that he kind of broke out in the shortened season, and I wasn't invested at all last year. But he's shown that he can do it. Repeatedly. He's in a fantastic lineup. He's got the power. He's got the speed. It all works pretty well there for Teoscar. For Cedric Mullins is interesting because he seems like a guy who, is he had a really good season, and now everybody's like, well, he's just going to fall backward. But there's a pretty clear reason why he got better. I mean, he switched over to hitting only left-handed. I think we're not expecting another 30-30 season, but when you look at every single projection system has him for a 2020 season with more steals. The lowest steals projection he has is 25, and the lowest home runs he has is 21. The batting average seems a little bit light for me. He should lose a little bit of power, like not get to those 30 home runs, but the BABIP, given his speed at 322, is not abnormally high. So he seems like a guy who's kind of falling, and I'm not sure. I'm not just saying this because of Justin, but I don't know. I just think that, if you start off with two pitchers, I haven't drafted Mullins yet, but if you start off with two pitchers, and Mullins is sitting there, like it's pretty appetizing to get somebody who's just could be a pretty solid 5-category contributor, and where there's pretty good consensus of him being a 2020 guy at this point in the draft. So I haven't drafted him yet, but I can see the appeal of Mullins as he kind of slips down the draft board a little bit. Aaron Judge, I've always struggled with Aaron Judge. I wish I loved something as much as Steamer projections love Aaron Judge. But I can't get there, and maybe I should. Because when he's healthy, he's an absolute beast. I think the one challenge is the steals aren't necessarily going to be there. The batting average has been pretty solid at 276, but again, like if I'm not going to go after Yordan Alvarez over in a relatively similar spot, I'm probably not going to be going after Judge either. And then with Buxton, I mean, if Buxton can just play a full season, and that's what we've all been saying, so there's just huge risk with it. And it's not like it's just been, I mean, there's been some freak injuries in there as well, but the combination of kind of like soft tissue injuries as well as just his aggressive play in the field has been, it's doomed him. And he's going to be healthy one of these years, and he's going to be a league winner. It's just hard to draft him at this spot right now. With all of those concerns out there.
Yeah, this is a fun spot, and this is where we start to get, especially the next grouping. But this is the first set of grouping where, like, we can wait 2 rounds on some of those early outfielders, start taking these guys if you're comfortable with like your shortstops or your pitchers or whatever early on, and still be fine. It's already showing the depth of the outfield 2 to 3 rounds into the draft, and it gets pretty good throughout the next 4 or 5 rounds. But Whit Merrifield, we talked about him at second base. I prefer him at second base in the outfield. It's very simple, but like I said, Starling Marte comp similarities, lots of similarities there. Marte maybe has a little more power upside. Witt's just he's doing it just as consistently as Starling to me. So there's a few minor differences, and that's probably why he's going 10 picks later. But one thing we do know, Kansas City will run. They will run as much as they want. So that is, as long as he gets on base, he will run. And that's what Witt does very well. So if you want to take Witt, I have zero problem with that. But I actually don't think I have any shares yet this year, which is quite surprising. The next guy I have a lot of, Teoscar Hernandez, huge fan of Teoscar. Had him 2 years ago, had a little bit of him last year. He's worth every piece. The 12 steals was great last year. Projection sites all have him for double-digit steals, 30-plus homers. He hit 296 last year, 289 the year before in the shortened season, but the 230 to 239, I think he's definitely somewhere in between. The projections agree. The 260 to 270 range seems a lot more feasible for Teoscar because he does still strike out quite a bit. But overall, the dude is an absolute freak. In that lineup, he's going to be great. So there's a lot to like there for sure. So yeah, zero problems with Teoscar. I like what you said on Mullins because I like to troll Justin because Justin's fun to troll and he's good at the give and take of it.
He's very trollable.
Yes, very trollable. I think Danielle proves that on a daily basis for us. But what I've said many times with Mullins, and I had to even text. I was texting Spore because of people listening to Sleeper and the Bust, which you probably do if you listen to this show. That I've been brought up a couple times based on a tweet that I made about Cedric Mullins recently. But I sent Spore the tweet because he didn't understand the whole volume of it. And it was saying, if we all keep saying Simeon shouldn't be drafted so early because he's on a career season, then why are we drafting Ced Mullins so early on a career season? And the fact he's dropping now makes it much more intriguing to draft him, as you were saying. I didn't want him on the 1-2 turn where things were starting out. That wasn't a part of my plan. Because, yes, he went 30-30. Let's be realistic here. 2020, 2025. Like, I think the steals are very much there. Like the power 25 homers, maybe a little less. Still great. Those great numbers, phenomenal numbers. I think the average might take a bit of a hit. And most importantly, you never know what Baltimore's going to do. The supporting cast, it's already kind of like it's good, but not great. And it could get worse because they still want to trade more guys. So there's just so many questions with Baltimore. And I just want to see it again with Ced. But now that he's fallen into round 3, maybe he falls to the back end of round 3, he's in the conversation for me now. Much more in the conversation where I was just kind of passing on him early on. Now he's much more interesting because now he gets in the discussion, Ced versus Tyler O'Neill, Ced versus Randy Arozarena, those kind of stolen base kind of power guys. Now you're starting to get conversations that make things quite interesting because I never thought he should go ahead of Teoscar and some of those guys. Now he's not. Aaron Judge, love the guy. I understand the concerns. Those have been well documented by a lot of people. We talked about it, I think, on this show or a different show that he took up yoga before last season.
The yoga narrative.
Yes. And it showed. It helped him stay healthy in a big way. And we'll see if it works for year 2. But there's a lot to be said about that. And it's another kind of risk-reward thing. Do you want to take the risk? Because his reward is tremendous. I'll never forget writing an article about him a couple years ago about not staying healthy. But, man, that time when he's healthy, legit one of the best hitters in all of baseball. Like, it is ridiculous what he can do at the plate. So it's a risk reward, and you're getting a little farther away where the risk might be where, like, the juice may be worth the squeeze, as they say. So I don't mind Aaron Judge at all if you want to take that risk. Buxton's an even riskier risk, but has a higher ceiling because if you said Mullins 30-30, Buxton could do that almost with his eyes closed if he stayed healthy, at least in the old days. So these are two between Judge and Buxton. Like, if you're in an overall competition, big fan of taking a chance here, especially on Buxton. If you're in just a standalone league, I got no problem. If you want to say, nope, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait this one out. But the ceiling on these guys is huge. So I like both of them. I got shares of both. I actually have both of them on my Raz Slam team.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, because I'm just going for the gusto.
Points
in
galore.
That. Points galore. And it's, deep benches. So let's see what happens. Best ball style. So, yeah, I like them a lot, but there's tons of risk. There's no sugarcoating that at all, but big rewards. All right, 16 through 20. This is a section of the draft I've sprinkled all throughout my teams. Tyler O'Neill, pick 53. Randy Arozarena, 58. George Springer, 69. Eloy Jimenez, 76. And Nick Castellanos at 78. How are we breaking down this group?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. This has a bunch of guys, like, I haven't really been sprinkling this throughout. I like Tyler O'Neill, I think, just from a power and speed combination, as well as he's a strong defender, so he's going to be in the lineup every day. I think O'Neill is, I really like O'Neill a lot. Arozarena, I have one share of him so far. I got him in one draft where I kind of needed that power speed combo. But I'm not as sold on Arozarena. Like, we haven't seen the same level of power. 30 barrels last year, the 20 home run, obviously the 20 steals, and that's really critical. And the batting average has been solid. But I'm still just a little bit skeptical because of the high K rate. that like whether or not how sustainable it's going to be, as well as just the way that they kind of worked him in and out of the lineup a little bit too much down the stretch there. For me, Springer, I mean, Springer checks like every box except for the speed box. You know, he's in a fantastic lineup. Like he just contributes across the board. Just from a counting stat perspective, he's massive because he's going to hit for a ton of power. He's going to score runs and he's going to get RBI. You know, the batting average and the steals though are his two weakest points, and so for that reason, I haven't really found myself grabbing him at all. Eloy is also really interesting to me because, you know, last year I was willing to draft him in the third round, you know, in some drafts. And this year I just haven't been able to do it. And it's totally recency bias and like the injury that he suffered last year. And there's nothing to indicate that he's going to, you know, re-injure that injury. So he should still be the guy. And that's a high batting average, just absolute masher, but I haven't found myself as interested. And I think one of the common threads you'll find throughout this is just like, I am really looking at this point in the draft. As the draft goes on, there's fewer and fewer guys who can provide you with speed and can without too many warts. And so if you're going to build a team that's especially like starting or pitcher heavy, you know, then if you're not grabbing guys with steals here or guys with elite batting average, but really like guys with steals in an overall competition, then it makes your job really, really difficult. You're already making it difficult by going starting pitching heavy or pitching heavy. It makes it incredibly difficult when you then don't start drafting steals, you know? So a little bit of it is just my like own perspective. You know, but I just haven't been able to grab him. And then Castellanos, like I have honestly, like, you know, JD Martinez is going,
bingo.
you know, however many picks later, he's five guys later on our list. But I mean, what's the difference between Nick Castellanos and JD Martinez, other than the fact that JD Martinez has done it a lot more times than Nick Castellanos has done it? He also benefited tremendously from the home park. We talked about it before, so I won't go into too much depth, but his home road splits were ridiculous. And so I'm not so sure that he doesn't lose a ton of pop depending on where he ends up. And then like, if he's not hitting like 35 home runs and he's just hitting high 20s or mid 20s, like what's the difference between Nick Castellanos and your boy Trey Mancini? Like, is there a huge difference?
What's the difference between Nick Castellanos and Chris Bryant?
God. Well, he's not Chris Bryant. No. So generally, like, I'm not really in that much on this area. I like Tyler O'Neill. I like Randy Arozarena a little bit because they provide that speed. But I don't like those last three. I'm not really in on them just because of team build reasons, not because I think they're bad.
That's why I'm glad you mentioned that, because I need to start drafting more with Toby. I think I'm in like 2 drafts with you. I need more because we need to. Yeah. We have different like, I don't mind going pitchers early. I will at times. I haven't yet this year. I really haven't. And so that's why I think I like this range so much, because I either go Tyler O'Neill, who I think is legit. I know I have a tendency for liking these guys that swing and miss a ton, but I keep telling myself, and again, it could be fool's gold, but it's kind of the way things are going. That's just the way baseball is these days. Like, it's not maybe the best analysis, but and the batting average could suffer, but I think the power and the speed is still going to be there. Like, it's going to be there. It's going to hit in the middle of that St. Louis lineup, which is going to be still very good with Arenado and Goldie, and Edmund will get on base. Like, Tyler O'Neill's going to be very good, even if he strikes out 30 to 35% of the time. Like, he's going to be very, very good. And that's just what these guys do these days. And could their cliff might have a larger fall than others? That is true. But I think at their age and what we're seeing, I think it's going to be just fine and go from there. So I like Tyler O'Neill. I love Randy Arozarena still. I think it's one of those, like you mentioned, it was with Eloy, and I agree with this. Arozarena was going a lot higher last year too. A lot higher last year. So it's another one of those deals. And I think he still can get the 2020 from a guy like Randy Arozarena that we were talking about last year. He's not that far removed from like monster numbers He had 2020 last year, for crying out loud, with 94 runs scored in 141 games, hit 274. Projections have him for 2020, at least the BatX has him 22-17, ATC 23-19. Only a 260-ish average, which I think he's going to hit for a better average because he has in every season he's been in the big leagues. And the power and the speed, I think, is very, very legit with Randy Rosarena. Yes, the Rays can always platoon things. It's an issue, but he still played 140 games. That's not a massive platoon if I've ever seen one myself. And Austin Meadows is getting worse and worse. So I think Rosarena is going to get his fair shake of things. And I like him quite a bit back here. If you're looking for speed, I think he's a really, really good one. He's been falling too because for a while he was going in that grouping beforehand, and he's fallen quite a bit. So I have a lot of O'Neill, I have a lot of Rosarena to really pack on the steals before I start getting my pitcher run going on. George Springer, I've been buying more and more into him the more I look. The biggest concern, injury. The guy he was really, really banged up last year, really never got healthy. It's like, did he come back early or what? I don't know. But prior to that, 51 games in the 60-game season, 122, 140, 140. Hasn't really been a full go since 2016. That's the only time he's been a full go. So you got to keep that in mind. But great OBP skills, doesn't strike out a ton, got 25 plus home run power. All the projections have for 30 plus. Just not going to steal a ton. But if he's leading off for Toronto, you're talking about some massive numbers there. So he's, again, a risk just because of his health concerns. So it's like, do you want to take a risk with Springer or Aaron Judge? What do you want to do? I think Judge has the higher ceiling, but you never know. If you want to wait and take the same similar risk, Springer's interesting. So I like him. Eloy, like him as well. I think there's a lot to like there. You mentioned he was like a second, third round pick last year. I think people are forgetting that. He should be completely healthy. In a great lineup. I think that's one of the better steals of the draft if you're good with steals. So make sure you're good there because I think Eloy is going to have a huge, huge season. Just is not going to run, but batting average, he'll be a 4-category guy for you. I think people sleep on how good his batting average can be. He's actually a very, very good hitter. So I like Eloy a lot. Casty's the only one I have 0 shares of. 0 shares of Casty because of where's he playing. I am seriously concerned about that. I usually don't care that much. Like Javi Baez, I'm still cool with Detroit. This is what it is. Casty, I'm terrified. We saw his time in Detroit, blew up in Chicago, or really blew up in Cincinnati. There's rumors of the Giants. There's rumors of some other places that kind of scare me. So it could be a false concern. Maybe he's a value right now because he signed somewhere great. Who knows? But with all the other options around him, I'll pass. I'll take the high road on this one and go somewhere else. But I like this range a lot. You got some steals guys. You got some great other 4-category type contributors here. Really solid outfield options if you need to go that route. All right, 21 through 25, Tommy Edman at 79, Ketel Marte at 90, Dalton Varsho at 94, Cody Bellinger at 98, and the aforementioned J.D. Martinez at 99, which gives us 25 outfielders in the top 100, Toby.
Yeah. The first two guys like Edman and Marte, we've discussed them a lot on the second base preview, so I won't go into depth. I like both of those guys. I like Varsho a lot, but you're probably not going to use him in your outfield spot at all this year. So thinking about him from an outfield perspective doesn't make a ton of sense, but as a catcher, for sure. With Belly, I don't have any shares of Belly yet. When I think about it could be great, but he's such a tinkerer,
I have none as well.
The injuries have bothered him now for a while. I haven't done it yet. I know that a lot of people compare kind of Belly and Yelich. I think if I had to choose one of those guys, I'd probably go with Belly, just because of position. He's first base eligible still, right?
I has had him here. Give me a second. No, he's not outfield only.
He's not. He's outfield only.
That's big.
Wow.
Actually. That's pretty big.
I should know that, but geez, that's disgusting. Holy cow.
Forget about it. Nothing to do with him anymore.
Yeah, then he becomes a lot less interesting.
Well, I'll say this much. He could be one of those guys, if you're planning ahead, he'll probably gain first base with Muncy's injury. I could see Belly again. This is where spring training would be nice because maybe you'd see Belly taking some reps. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Bellinger return to some first base action.
Yeah.
Because I don't know who else they'd play there, really, off the top of my head. I'd have to like really dig into their roster, but he seems like an easy fit to slide over there. And then you could put consistently Taylor, Pollock, and maybe even Lux in the outfield or something. Like there's bets, like there's that way you can get Lux in the lineup every day, basically.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if that's the case, I mean, he's a little bit more interesting. But the thing about Belly is, he had that one season in 2019. But even in that season, his first half, he hit 331. The second half, he hit 260. So, that season looks like a massive outlier. And if that season is a massive outlier, then you're looking at the ceiling being like, or the likely batting average being under 260, because that seems like, in every other half of baseball, he's essentially, 2 full seasons, it's been around 260. So, I just don't see it at being that interesting of a profile, especially without the first base eligibility, because that's one of the biggest things was, his ability to steal bases as a first baseman / corner infielder, as well as the position flexibility. So I'm not as into Belly as I was coming into this podcast for that reason, but I still don't have any shares. He's a tinkerer. I don't think he's necessarily going to be like a league winner necessarily, knock on wood, or whatever. He can do that if he wants to. Yeah, I just can't pull it off. There's too much. There's not a good enough batting average. Older, didn't even steal bases last year. Injuries, tinkering, all of those things. I'm staying away. JD Martinez is a little bit interesting. In my current draft, actually, I'm a little bummed that I didn't. You know how drafts develop. Like you're kind of like, oh, like I really wanted to get a share of Verlander, and so I grabbed Verlander instead of JD Martinez in this draft. And then it's like Nede Eovaldi went at like pick 150 or something like that. And I was like, why on earth? What? I would have had so many shots at this guy. But JD Martinez, I mean, he's been really solid. The lack of speed again is a reason why I'm generally not as interested, but I do have him in at least one league. And the batting average has been there. 2020 looks like the clear outlier, like the batting average, the power. He's in a really good lineup. He's got 600 plus plate appearances in 3 of the last 4 years. He even had 237 in that 2020. So he's been healthy. He's got outfield eligibility this year. So I don't mind him at all right there. Especially if you need like power and batting average based on how you build in your foundation. So I like JD.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about Edman. We talked about Marte. Second base options, probably not the outfield if you want them. A little bit of speed there with Edman. That's what you're going for. Varsho, I've expressed my love for Varsho many times, but as you said, catcher, not outfielder. But I love Varsho. If anybody was curious, still love him. But Belly, I'm with you 100%. Like I have zero Belly. Like Vlad Sedler is a genius, a very smart man, great fantasy player. I respect his opinion. I still can't get behind Bellinger, and he loves Belly. He loves him for a bounce back. I can't do it. There's like certain guys I'm okay being wrong on. I'll be wrong on Belly. I wrote down a comparison. I'll wait until we talk about a few more players before I start comparing guys I take instead of Belly type situations. But if he were to gain first base, is at least intriguing, and I think he will. But that's still kind of hoping. And then are you going to waste a pick there and find out? It's tough. So yeah, no Belly for me, and I like JD. I like him a lot. I think that lineup's still very good. Verdugo gets on base a ton. Devers, Bogarts, and company. So I think it's Enrique Hernandez. Lots of good pieces there in front of JD. We saw him kind of pick things up again last year after kind of a slow, 2020 for the standards we expect from JD Martinez. Never going to run. That's way in the past. But the power is legit. The RBIs are insane. Like as you get deeper in the draft, it's harder to find 100 RBI guys. He's definitely still one of them, which is really, really good when you're looking at categories. Because I don't think people talk about RBIs as much as we should, runs, RBIs, and whatnot. So I think JD's great in that regard, as you mentioned. So he's pretty much the only guy outfield-wise I want in this group. I'll have a ton of Varsho, of course, but JD be the only one here that I would be focusing on. All right, 26 through 30. We got Brian Reynolds at pick 100, Christian Yelich at pick 101, Giancarlo Stanton at 109, Chris Bryant 110, and Jesse Winker at 116. Some interesting names here. Now it's getting a little more fun. Not as many, I guess, obvious choices, but some pretty interesting ones. So, what do you like in this one?
Yeah, I like Brian Reynolds a lot. I've got a couple shares of him. The batting average is really nice. He showed a lot more power last year, 4.46 barrels last year, 10.4%. He only had 24 home runs from those 46 barrels. So I think there's a little bit more pop there. He's also pretty fast. He added those 5 steals. So, I wouldn't expect anything more than that, but he's a really solid, just all around guy. I think 2020 was clearly the outlier when it came from that. And I mean, there were signs last year, like he had in 2020, like he had a higher barrel rate. Like there was just a lot of bad luck going on there and not enough time for him to turn it around. So I like Reynolds a lot. He's a guy that I get in this area, even though he doesn't have a ton of speed. The batting average is good enough where I feel pretty good about. I feel decent about snagging him. Yelich, I haven't been able to get behind Yelich. The projections tell me that I should like him, but the injuries, the back, the ground ball rate, the continued struggles now for a year and a half. I haven't been able to get there. Do you know if Giancarlo Stanton is doing yoga?
I believe they both are, yes.
They're
Him
both
and
doing
Judge.
yoga, so
That explains his
that
season
that
last
gives
year.
a little bit of a boost to Stanton. But again, I'm like a broken record.
No steals.
Uh, yeah, there's no steals,
There's really
and
no
he was
steals in this
healthy
entire
last
range.
year. He hit those 35 home runs. Like his batting average isn't even going to hurt you that much.
Hmm.
But I can't get there with Stanton. I just can't go after this type of a profile at this point because it's really like, I don't know, like 2 categories, like home runs and RBI, maybe a little bit of batting average there. But his run totals, he's only had 2 years where the run totals were decent. He's not stealing bases at all, despite the yoga. That doesn't seem to be helping him. So I haven't been able to get there. I think the projections also tell me I should like him as well. So, well, he's a 0. So he's right where he should be going. And then Chris Bryant is Chris Bryant. We talked about him in third base. He should probably be going after pick 400. Chris Bryant. Just kidding. Him and Kevin Biggio would make a really great infield somewhere on a team I don't like. That would be really bad. Jesse Winker is fine. He's good batting average wise, but I feel like health is an issue for him. Am I making that up?
No, it is. He played 110 last year. He played 54 in 2020, but 113 is the most he's ever played.
Yeah. So, I mean, it looks beautiful, but yeah, exactly. The 485 plate appearances is the most that he's
I
ever
will say,
reached.
I don't know if it's all injury based. He was like a platoon for a few of those years.
I know he was like strong side of the platoon, but he
Yeah.
hasn't shown yet that he can do that
Yeah.
daily grind, throughout the course of a full season. So I don't necessarily think I can get that behind it. There's no steals. There is the batting average, which is really nice. And I loved Jesse Winker when he was like a rookie and like in 2017 and 2018. I loved him. But I'm just not sure he's ever going to become, Joey Votto Jr.
He's got the OBP skills to be Joey Votto Jr.
He does. He
That's for
does.
sure.
I mean,
But
he's a
the rest of
very
it,
good.
tough.
Yeah, he's a very good player. But again, like around here, I mean, the biggest thing for me with all these guys, I'm saying like, no, thank you, no, thank you. Even though they're like good players, and their statistical contribution is going to be pretty. It could be pretty strong. Is I just don't see them being that much better than guys that are going later. Like, with a lot of these guys, like, I don't know, where's Franmil going?
He's a
Like,
UT only.
I know he's U2 till only, but like, he's kind of the same as like a lot of these guys, right? I don't even like Franmil, but, he's going later on. Like, these guys are a dime, like Joey Votto is all these guys, like he's doing all these things and he's going later and he's at first base. Like, I could just scroll through here and point out dudes who are
but you have to
essentially
start.
these
You have to start
guys.
5 outfielders, Toby.
I know, like Hunter Renfroe. Hunter Renfroe can do these things that these people are doing.
Not the same average though.
I mean, don't sell him short. But yeah, I mean, I guess not with like Winker, right?
Yeah,
But he's also going to hit like 10 more home runs probably than Winker's going to hit.
potentially.
And he's been able to be healthy throughout the full season. And he's a good defensive outfielder, so he's probably going to play all the time. So, I mean, it's all just to say, like, it's all just like which profiles are available. And a lot of the profiles that are available here are just kind of like, I mean, he's a good player, but it's not really something that I'm super interested in having on my team. I'm also a terrible drafter, though. So that would be another reason not to listen to me at all.
Oh man, yeah, he's terrible, guys. He's so
And
bad
my
at this.
clear bias against Chris Bryant, too. I mean, God, after ADP 400, that's ridiculous. I would double tap Kevin Biggio and Chris Bryant though in like rounds, I don't know, like 27 and 27, 28 turn.
Yeah, they'll be hanging around. One of them will
Yeah.
be for sure. So you got
For
that
sure.
going for you. For me in this range, I do like Brian Reynolds. To me, it's like in reality, if you look at it, Reynolds and Winker, there's a lot in common there. Both make mid-20s power, both hit around 300. If it's speculating because it doesn't happen, if Winker can play like 140 and maybe the DH helps with that, that could be something. We could see like 30 plus, 35 plus in that ballpark because he's got that insane power in like 100 games. And that could be a differentiating factor. Like Reynolds will probably steal 5 more bases than Winker, but that power is pretty darn legit. So I have some shares of Winker. Like I'm playing for the ceiling with Winker. Very, very aware that might fall short, but I think there is another layer there with Winker. Hopefully we can actually get him to stay on the field. That'd be a big plus. But I like Reynolds. No problem with Reynolds either. I'm just the Pirates concern me a ton. So like who's getting traded next is the question. It might be Brian Reynolds for all we know. So that one concerns me. No Yelich for me, none at all. No Chris Bryant for me. We talked about that. Giancarlo's interesting. We talked Belly. We talked Yelich. I'd rather have Stanton over both of them. I think, and if you look at their overall like stat lines and everything, a lot of similarities there. But Stanton, that 279 average, the average batting average in baseball last year was 245, 244 the year before. So he's well above it. As average continues to drop, he is not sucking your batting average. He's going to hit for power. Even though he has short seasons, he still hits 27 to 30 homers, which you're drafting him for more, but he's not killing you in that department. And hopefully the replacement value is good too. So I don't mind standing late. I'd honestly rather take a chance on Winker potentially, which maybe sounds just completely foolish, but I think his upside's really, really strong, but he hasn't put it together. So for me, it's pretty much Stanton and Winker with some Reynolds in this range. Not the like I liked the previous ranges a little more. Not as in love with this one, but definitely some pieces to go for. I think Winker is the only one I've rostered so far at this point in time. All right, Toby, let's do the 31 through 35 here. Let's have a little.
Oh man,
more
we're
fun
gonna
here.
go for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do it.
We're doing good tonight. So let's go a little farther here.
Keeping it down, keeping the chitter chatter to a minimum here.
And we have no listener questions, so we can roll a little more.
We have no listener questions, and we're just like, it's not like our other episodes. I mean, we're just going player through player through player through player, rolling. Like nonstop.
And speaking of nonstop, pick 31 at pick ADP 118 and a half. This is one, if Toby's waiting on steals, this is his guy. So Miles Straw, Mitch Haniger at 122, Ryan Mountcastle at 125, Jared Kalenic at 126, and Kyle Schwarber at 135. So how many Miles Straw shares do you have?
I have 0 shares of Miles Straw, Bubba. How dare you insinuate that I would draft Miles Straw? No, there's just not enough power from Miles Straw.
There's not enough a lot of things in that profile.
Yeah. Honestly, though, in the debate over like, is Miles Straw Malik Smith? It's like
it's a fun debate.
He's not. I mean, I think that Miles Straw is probably going to play and be pretty good. I just think it's with the power being so light, like just so light. I mean, you're talking like, what is he projected for? Probably 5 home runs, something like that. I don't have it in front of me.
I got it right here. I just had it. He's projected for
I think he hit
four,
he had
four,
I
four home
think
runs.
he had
He had
he had
four
4
last
home
year.
runs.
He's
Did he have
projected
like
for four.
6 barrels
Ooh,
in
that's not good.
448 batted ball events.
That's
Yeah.
pretty low.
So
1.3%.
I just can't get there with that. I just can't get there with that. Like
That's Billy
I think he's
Hamilton-esque.
it is, but I mean, but he's good. Like he makes a ton of contact. He's got really good plate discipline, so he gets on base. So he does a lot of those things, but I just like the RBI are going to hurt you, the home runs are going to hurt you. You know, the batting average hasn't been that good. So maybe if you're a super power heavy guy, but the minute you start drafting guys like this to plug it in, then you become so unbalanced and you're so vulnerable to injuries or Miles Straw not being that good or being dropped in the lineup, you know? And the OPS stuff and all that stuff like makes sense to me, but he's actually like a decent OBP guy, 349 OBP. The slugging is kind of like, it's not irrelevant generally, but like they're not hitting him first so that he can hit home runs. You know, they're like, they want him to get on base and he's been doing a really good job of that. And he's got a lot of speed. And so for that reason, like I think he's fine. But guys like this just result in really unbalanced teams. And I don't want to do that to myself. The reason I'm drafting steals earlier on is so instead of drafting Miles Straw, I can draft one of the other outfielders that's got a really balanced profile here in the middle rounds. Or, you know, I can draft, you know, like Brian Hayes, like we talked about last week, or, you know, just so many other guys that I'd rather draft than Miles Straw. You know, like I might even draft Chris Bryant before Miles
And that
Straw,
says it all,
honestly.
folks. That says
No,
it
like, I
all.
mean, DJ LeMahieu is
I'm not
there.
arguing
Like
with you.
Wilson Contreras is there. I'm arguing with myself right now.
Yeah.
Dansby Swanson's there. Jesse Winker, we just talked about. Like, there's some really good baseball players that can contribute in more than two and a half categories.
You can find 2.5 category guys about 200 picks later.
Yeah.
Sorry. As you were. There's 4
No,
more
I
guys.
mean, totally. Oh, I thought I was done just after
Yeah.
Miles Straw. I didn't even realize I had to talk to anybody else. I don't have any of the next 4 guys: Mitch Haniger, Ryan Mountcastle, Jared Kelnick, and Kyle Schwarber. I mean, Haniger has fallen, and I've been very close to getting him. But you know, again, like I'm not trying to be a broken record here, but you know, he's one of these guys. He was hitting 250, 30 home runs, you know, a nice runs in RBI because he's in a nice spot in the lineup. But like last year was like the perfect year for Mitch Haniger, right? He was totally healthy. He got close to 700 plate appearances. He hit a huge amount of home runs. He got a lot of runs. He got a lot of RBI. You know, he's not probably going to get to the same number of plate appearances this year. And he needed all those plate appearances to get there. And I love that line. And if that was the line, it would be great. But there are other guys who are hitting like 230 with 30 home runs and 80 runs in RBI going later on that I feel decent about getting later on instead of grabbing him here. So I don't get him either here. Mountcastle's interesting, I think. He's got the dual position eligibility. He's obviously going to be hurt a little bit by the movement of the walls that has taken place in the off season. He's got pop though, you know, 33 home runs, 45 barrels. So like a little bit of luck there. But again, like, you know, what is his profile? It's like the same thing. Like who's better, Ryan Mountcastle or Trey Mancini? Honestly, like, I don't know, straight up, I don't know, Trey Mancini. I might want more. So again, like there's just so much just like blah, like just the same profile of all these guys for the next 100 picks. And I don't mean you know, each one of these people is an individual and deserve to be treated as such, but they all kind of fall together. Kelnick is a little bit more difficult for me because I can definitely see him. He's got the prospect pedigree. He can make that jump. He makes that kind of non-linear jump. He was much better in September last year than he was throughout the rest of the season. But I still think there's going to be issues with the batting average. Especially like, I think his BABIP was super low, right? Because the problem is like, they're going to shift him and he's going to hit into the shift a lot. He's going to lose a lot to that. At least that's my analysis, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, 216 BABIP. And not quite enough power, I don't think. 23 barrels. That's decent. That's okay for the 14 home runs. So you can definitely see like the 2010 happening, but I worry about what that batting average is going to be. Like, what is that batting average suck going to be? And there's just like other guys with relatively, similar profiles going later on that we'll probably talk about next week, that I don't have the same level of batting average concerns for. Or like, what's the difference between him and like Robbie Grossman, going later on? Like, Grossman may even steal more bases than he does, and will probably bat first in that lineup, and is a switch hitter. So there's just too much, and I'll probably, he'll probably blow up, and I'll be putting out shame tweets about him for all of next year because of his non-linear development. Kyle Schwarber is really good, but again, and like the one thing I like about Schwarber is I feel like he's really close to like also just being, I think he's just like a good hitter, and the batting average hasn't been awful, right? It wasn't awful last year.
No, it wasn't too bad.
At 266. Yeah. So it's not like the same, 211, 238, 188 type sinkholes that it's been. But again, like, I don't think this profile is super special. Yeah. Again, I'm sorry to be a broken record to everybody, but like, these guys are all a dime a dozen to me.
It is a range that I'm not a big fan of either. Miles Straw, I want zero things to do with. I'm just not doing it. I'm not paying for steals. I draft that elsewhere. So no Miles Straw for me. You want that content, go to Twitter. People love him. Mitch Haniger is interesting, but still the batting average does concern me. Not running like we like Mitch Haniger to do. He ran really well when it came to home runs last year, which was great. Stayed healthy last year, which was great. Still some concerns for me, so I'll pass on that one. I do have some Ryan Mountcastle. The eligibility is a big plus for me, first base and outfield. That's a big kicker, so that helps out a lot, especially these DC type drafts. Not so much maybe in the regular Fab type leagues. He still has that close to 30 home run power, even the projections after they factored in the shift in the outfield. Still has him like anywhere from like 28 to 31 homers, which is pretty solid. He'll still get a couple bags, nothing great, but so he's good. He's not great, like you said. Like Mancini's there. There's other guys. So he's not like a must draft at that point. So again, this is why I wait on pitching. I get my pitching around this point in the draft. It's just kind of the way I've been doing things. No Jared Kalenic for me. If I'm going to take a chance on some bounce back prospects, Jaron Duran, Joe Adell, those are guys later in the draft I'll go take chances on. Not a big Kalenic guy. And then last but not least, Schwarber. I do like Schwarber. I liked him when he used to be like 100 picks later. This new Schwarber is kind of not the same. Plus, we don't know where he's playing, and that's big. That's real big. We have no idea. He'll likely DH somewhere. The National League is going to love him. So maybe he goes back to Washington. Who knows? Things were fun there. So I don't mind if you feel like you're short on power because you sold out for other stuff. I think he's interesting. He's very interesting because he's got that 35 plus home run upside with Schwarbombs. But this is a group I have like none of at all. So it's a really, really tough spot for me in this like 31 through 35 range of the outfield. All right, we'll wrap it up there, Toby. And we have one listener question. James DeViglio has a question. Eddie Rosario, are you drafting him this year? His ADP's 175 right now. And where do you think he ends up playing?
Yeah, I have one or two shares, I think, so far this year. Of Eddie Rosario. I like Eddie a lot. I don't know. I could see him ending up in Atlanta,
Yeah,
I mean, obviously he fits in there really well. He's kind of a cult hero now because of what he was able to do in the playoffs for them. If Freddie doesn't come back, then that's another slot in the lineup where they could not that they're going to put him at first base, but that's just another slot in the lineup where he could kind of fit in as a power left-handed bat. You could see him hitting third, fourth, whatever, in that lineup and being a real force. I haven't drafted him recently, partially because of the uncertainty, and partially I don't know why, because of other players that I'm going after, I think, in this range. But I do like him. It happens every single year where I'm like, oh, I should draft Eddie Rosario while he's at pick 175 before he gets signed, because he's going to hit for a good average, decent power, and steal 10 bases. And then I'm like, but I don't know where he's going to be. And then it's like 2 months later, I'm like, oh, I'm going to draft Eddie Rosario at pick 125 because he hits for average, 20 plus homers, and 10 stolen bases. Yeah, maybe I should draft him in my current draft right now. Maybe I'll do that. But I don't mind drafting Eddie at all. Again, it's the uncertainty. And that's one of the challenges. I mean, that's one of the things that gets so tired about these DC drafts is like, we're just working with incomplete information, and the drafts that we have when the regular season rolls around are going to be very different because we'll have a lot more information, hopefully, at our disposal.
Yeah, that's kind of why I've slowed down the DC parts. I did like a 50 last week, and I'm doing these other drafts, but it's usually we have moving ADP by now because of spring training news or something, but it's just been stale for like 2 months. And it's made it kind of tough to kind of get a feel on things. So I agree, Eddie Rosario, once he signs somewhere, unless it's like really bad for some reason, he's moving up. He's moving up for sure, because the profile you mentioned is something you've been looking for, and he's going to contribute pretty much in five-ish categories. Like runs and RBIs are kind of low, but those are in like if he plays like 140 plus, which he could do, those will be fine. Average is good. 8 to 10 steals is fine. 25 plus home runs. Like he's going to help you a little bit everywhere on like a lot of these guys we've been talking about for the last half hour probably. So he really should skyrocket up some rankings if you want to jump on him now. It's tough.
One thing I'd say about him is he's the type of guy that, like in your TGFBI drafts, that you'd want to take,
Yes.
because you can draft him, and then if the situation isn't ideal, you have a waiver wire to go to.
Yep,
whereas when these draft champions, like it's really hard. It seems ridiculous to be like, oh, I don't want to waste like pick 175 or something, but like there are good players around pick 175.
Yep.
And it's like on my bench, like I'm going to have 4 or 5 outfielders, and probably 2 or 3 of them have some question marks around their playing time. And so that becomes a very small window you've just created for yourself to get a lot of plate appearances from your outfielder, which is the name of the game. Whereas in TGFBI, then you just kind of like move on from it, or if you're in a waiver wire league. And you also get to look forward to the gifts of Eddie, the Fire Eagle.
Yeah, the Fire Eagle.
I mean, that in and of itself is worth the price of admission, right?
Yeah, and this is why it's tough to take him right now, because you got guys like Benintendi, similar stat profile, Robbie Grossman, who we've talked about, Adolis Garcia, who you don't really like, but some do. I'm not a big fan either. But like Alex Kirilloff, Ian Happ, there's arguments to be made at least, but especially that Benintendi Grossman combo there, I've been finding myself flock to them more than Rosario. So that makes it tough. But I would definitely, like, if you like him, take him now, because he's going to be a lot pricier in the coming weeks whenever that happens. And where he signs, that's the fun part. Like the Giants could use him, the A's could use him. Those would both stink. The Rockies could technically find a way to use him if they really wanted to. That could be interesting. The Reds could use him if they wanted to have him out there instead of Casty. That could be an option. Like, I think in the end he's going to find something good. Let's put it that way. I'm not too concerned about that. All right, Toby, we're going to wrap it up there. We went 1 through 35. We'll hit 30 to 40 more next week. We'll see where things take us. But final thoughts on this front half of outfielders we've discussed.
Yeah, like a few guys I like, a lot of them I don't, I guess.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the ones you like on the next episode.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, do what you will with that outfield. There's some flexibility there. Draft guys who are doing yoga. That would be my
Yes, yoga.
my
The
best
yoga
chance.
narrative.
Draft the yoga narrative.
Yoga narrative runs strong on this podcast. But we'll be back with you guys next week. Again, talking Outfielders Part 2. See where it takes us. Get your listener questions coming in hot and heavy. Get those for us, and we'll make it happen for you. But until next time, Toby's on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm at BDentric. This is Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 114, your fantasy outfield preview part 1. Catch you all later.